Deep in the heart of Argentina, out on these endless plains called La Pampa, there's a figure who rides, and they're so much more than just a person. They're a living myth, a symbol of freedom itself. Today, we're diving deep into the world of the Gaucho.
Think about that for a second. Carved from myth and reality. It's this idea that they're both a shadow of freedom, this larger-than-life legend, but also a real person, someone who lived, who breathed, who works the land. And honestly, it's that split, that dual nature, that makes their stories so incredibly captivating.
So that really begs the question, right? Who was the real person hiding behind the myth? That's what we're going to do. We're going to peel back the layers of this legend and try to understand their incredible journey, from being on the fringes of society to becoming the very heart of a nation's identity. All right, first things first. If you really want to understand the Gaucho, you can't start with the person. You have to start with the land that made them. I mean, everything about them begins and ends with this vast, untamed landscape we call La Pampa. Just look at that. La Pampa, it's so much more than just a place, isn't it? It's a feeling. Seriously, just try to imagine standing out there, where the horizon is just this endless line of infinite possibility. That feeling, right there, that's what forged the Gaucho's untamed, always moving forward spirit. And this land had two very different sides to it. On one hand, the Pampas could be incredibly harsh. I'm talking a brutal frontier that demanded everything you had just to survive. But then, on the other hand, it was breathtakingly beautiful, a wide open symbol of endless freedom. It's that push and pull, that duality, that was the crucible that really forged the Gaucho. Okay, so we've got the land, but how did that land shape the person? Who exactly was the Gaucho? And what did they really stand for? Well, that brings us right to their identity and to this incredible, unwritten code of honor they lived by. What's so fascinating to me is that the Gaucho wasn't from just one single group. No, they were a child of many roots. A completely unique blend of indigenous peoples, Spanish settlers, and even African influences. And this mix, it created a figure that people described as both wild and wise. A guardian of the plains who you just couldn't pin down or put in a neat little box. And their gear, well, it wasn't just stuff they wore or used. It was like an extension of themselves. You had the wide-brimmed sombrero to fight off that relentless sun, the loose-fitting bombashes trousers perfect for riding, the boladoras, which is this really cool, unique hunting weapon, and of course, the faithful horse. Every single piece of this iconic outfit tells its own story of adaptation and survival. But really, what truly defined them wasn't what they wore. It was what they lived by. There was this invisible thread holding their entire world together, a code of honor. And the key thing is, it was never written down. It was just lived, every single day. In this code, it was pretty simple, but it was absolute. We're talking loyalty to family, respect for your friends, fairness when things got rough, and above all else, a Gaucho's word was their bond. That was it. In a world with very few written laws, this personal code was a kind of quiet rebellion, It was rooted in dignity and this just unbreakable sense of self. Okay, so that's who they were. But what about how they lived? Let's take a look at some of the daily rituals that really define their community and their connection to each other. So first and foremost, you have to talk about the horse. This relationship, it was absolutely sacred. Masterful horsemanship was a skill passed down from generation to generation. It wasn't just about riding a horse. It was described as a dance of balance and instinct, almost as if the rider and the horse were sharing a single heartbeat. Then, in the quieter moments, another ritual brought them together, sharing mate. Now, this was not just about drinking some herbal tea. The act of passing the gourd from one person to the next was a whole ceremony of trust. It was a circle of connection, a time where stories and even silence were shared. It was a way to reinforce that feeling of community, even when you're out in the vast, lonely solitude of the plains. And get this, they even had their own unique art form called the payada. I want you to picture a poetic duel. You've got two singers, a guitar, and they're just improvising verses right there on the spot. They'd sing about anything and everything: love, loss, epic battles, the land itself. It was, quite literally, the living history of the Pampas. And that's exactly why people call the payada the voice of the Pampas. Think about it. These songs carried the weight of generations. They were preserving the spirit and the memory of the Gaucho long, long before anyone thought to write their stories down in a book. So all of this brings us to the final part of our story, and honestly, it might be the most remarkable part. How in the world did this figure, who was once seen as a total outcast, become the very soul of a nation? It's an incredible transformation. Well, you can really see it happen in a few key stages. First, you've got the Gaucho as a frontier rebel, an outlaw on the edges of society. Then, those oral traditions, like the payada we just talked about, they keep the stories alive. Next, art and literature grab hold of those stories and start to reframe them, turning them into this sacred narrative of honor and resilience. And then, the final step, the Gaucho is lifted up to become a national icon, the ultimate symbol of authentic Argentine freedom. And when you boil it all down, this transformation wasn't just about the Gaucho. It was really about Argentina itself. See, as the nation was trying to figure out its own identity, its own cultural roots, it looked to this figure as a powerful symbol of resistance. And this idea was cemented, really set in stone, by literary works like the famous epic poem El Gaucho Martín Fierro, which basically took all their struggles and turned them into a heroic national story. And that spirit, it absolutely endures. There's a saying that as long as the vast plains of La Pampa exist, so does the Gaucho, riding on forever free, proud, and eternal. This whole story really gets at a much bigger, universal idea, doesn't it? The Gaucho is a living memory for Argentina. And that kind of makes you think, right? What figures from your own culture's past are more than just names in a history book? Who are the living memories that are still, right now, shaping who you are today?